Hi everyone, my name's Elizabeth, I'm a marine biologist, and today I'm going to be telling you the 5 books you need that's going to enable you to identify every single thing you find rock pooling ever. In today's video, I will be talking about the books that you need to identify marine creatures, things you find rock pooling, right from basic hobby level right up until marine biology expert. Now, I'm based in the UK, so the books that I'm going to be talking about today are the UK versions. However, I'm sure that around the world there are the equivalent of the UK version just for your area. So here for the UK one, the great guide that you want to get if you're at basic hobby level, going to go out with your kids, want to take them rock pooling, and you just want to know what the species are, then this book is for you. It is basically the Collins Complete Guide to British Coastal Wildlife. In here you have pictures, short descriptions of anything from the plants you find around beaches to the seaweeds, the creatures, all the way up until things like birds and even skulls at the back that you might find on the beach. The point of this book is to know what things are roughly. I mean, there are every type of marine creature covered in here. Everything or every type of animal you are going to find on the rocky shore will be in this book. They might just not be the species. So you might find a worm and know the type of worm, but it might not look exactly like it does in this book. And that's likely because it's not the species that's found in here. The ones that I found in here are the ones that are most common around the UK, but depending on where you're rock pooling, there's going to be a lot more specific species to that area that might not be covered in this book. If you're happy with that level, then fine, great, stick to it. Rock pooling is about fun, it's not about needing to know specifically what everything is, and this book is going to tell you enough to satisfy that curiosity. You're going to know roughly what it is, if not exactly what it is, just from this one singular book. To kind of walk through the differences between these books, I'm going to pick one group of species and walk you through exactly how you identify them in each book and kind of the level that we start to see differing from the start, which is the really basic guide, to the end, which is the expert marine biology level. I'm going to pick the group of species called bryozoans. Now, many people probably don't know what bryozoans are, and they're one of the trickier ones to ID, which is why I've picked it, because it really highlights why this just isn't good enough when it comes to doing really specific ID, and that marine biologists can't really rely on Collins guides to guide them through all their marine creatures. So bryozoans are little tiny creatures that form a colony. They kind of look no bigger than crisp size on rocks, and you have different types, and this book shows you the different types. You can see that there are ones that grow over different species, there are ones that grow kind of up and out, they're called erect forms, so they look a bit more like plants, and there are about 9 species covered in this book with pictures so that you can kind of see. So you would know that what you found on the shore was a bryozoan by looking at this. But there certainly are not only 9 species of bryozoan, in fact there are loads more, and to be able to ID these down to species, some you can do by eye and some you need a microscope for. But I'm going to pick one of the most common ones to read the description of to see what we're working with. Electropolosa is a striking bryozoan, forms flat encrusting mats on seaweed, notably Irish moss and grape pipweed. That's a good note, but you can find Electra on a lot of different stuff, and that's really not a defining feature of it in terms of when we move further up. An adult colony is whitish and irregular circled to star-shaped, which is actually a defining feature of that species, so that kind of makes sense. Individual zooid openings are oval, combined effect, vaguely recalling miniature chainmail, which I think is a really sweet and nice description. And we're talking about this species here. One of the things that this book might not do is define things like the word zooid. And as we go on, there's going to be a lot more terminology used to describe different species, but there are a lot more resources in the other books to kind of explain exactly what a zooid is, because that isn't explained within this book. But it's great because it also tells you that it's widespread, locally common, least so on coasts of East England. And that's really useful, because if you read in a book that is only found on one specific island on the middle of nowhere in Scotland, and you're finding it on the southeast coast of England, you know you've got your ID wrong, and this book is super handy for that. So that is what we're reading about bryozoans at the moment. So let's move on, show you the next set of books, if you're more curious, and kind of show you what they're going to give you. Now, I did say 5 books that you need to ID things, but as we move forward, there are 5 types of books, really, because there are a lot of species, and to cover them, lots of people decide to split up books, because you might not want to know everything. You might only care about sea squirts, or you might only care about seaweeds and not want to buy this giant heavy book, and it's easy to split them up. And one of the best groups of books to buy that will cover everything you need to know, but they come in kind of a set, are the Sea Search books on ID. These are some of the best books out there for getting to know the majority of the species that you can find. In particular, I love the seaweeds. Now, in that Collins guide, you have about 54 seaweeds. That's pretty good. I mean, not many people are going to want to know more than 54 seaweeds that cover the basis. But this book changes things, because there is 238 seaweed species. And these books are great because they've got good pictures, they've got a map to show you the distribution, and when we start to move into the descriptions, there are a lot more things that they cover, things such as texture, colour, reproduction, identity, confusions. This is really good because it highlights when 2 species are really similar, so that you can read the descriptions of both and make sure you're picking the right one. Things like habitat, what it grows on, and distribution is where it's found. The Sea Search books are in different categories. I've got seaweeds, sea squirts and sponges, and bryozoans and hydroids. There are a few more too. What you'll also find in these books are really good pages at the start that start to kind of break down exactly what it is, the identifying features. This is great. They have sizes so that you can see the size of each species done by something that's, you know, maybe not the most exact, but recognisable for us really quickly in the field, especially great with rock pooling, is, you know, finger, hand, arm, people sizes. So not only from these books are you going to be learning what species are, but you'll be learning a bit more about what the specific features of that species are that we use to identify them, and a bit more about their kind of like their natural history and their evolution and their reproduction, and it's really informative. So if you want to take your rock pooling knowledge to the next step, this is a really good purchase to do so. So if we look at what the information we have for our bryozoans electropolosa, you can see, I'm not going to read it out, but there is a lot more text here. It mentions different seaweeds such as Mastocarpus stellatus that it grows on, and then it starts to describe the zooids. So the last book mentioned zooids, and a zooid is basically the little individual animal that makes up the colony. So the colony is made up of zooids, and each animal is referred to as a zooid. And a lot of the bryozoans, you need to look specifically at each individual zooid, and after you've looked at the colony, to determine what it is. So this describes the zooids as roughly oval in shape. Each zooid has 2 small blunt spines at one end and single and long obvious spine at the other end, giving the colony a bristly appearance. There are about 4 to 12, often 9 other short spines distributed along the edge of the zooid. So now not only are we talking about the zooids, we'll be talking about the spines on the zooids. So on this tiny crisp-shaped, crisp-size kind of colony, we're now looking at the shape of that colony, then going to the zooid, then looking at what is on the zooid. And that is started to cover within these books. But potentially there are a lot of bryozoans, a lot of things that you can confuse them with. Potentially not Electra if you know what you're looking for, but with other species it can get really confusing, and there are a lot of similarities. So if you want to kind of make sure you're getting it right and completely confirm it, then we need to start moving on from books with pictures and descriptions to something a little bit more scientific and a little bit more set in stone, which is where book number 4 come in. But before we get to that, I want to discuss something with you guys. Okay, I kind of lied a little bit by saying 5 types of books, because number 3 isn't technically a book, but this is really exciting, so I'm hoping that you guys will forgive me. Number 3 is actually going to be websites. Websites and online information provide a really big base of knowledge. For example, those sea search books cover 238 species, was that what I said? But there are actually, I think, over 600 species of seaweed recorded in the UK. And sometimes there might even be seaweeds from around the world that are kind of washed up, and you might, you know, find something weird. And that's where the internet comes into play. Before I say about some really good sites that you can use, I have a little secret announcement, but don't tell anyone, it's a secret. So before this YouTube channel and during this YouTube channel, I've always had a website, marinemumbles.com. This has kind of been a place for blogs where I put my illustrations, but I want it to be something more useful for everyone, and I go rock pooling a lot and I take a lot of pictures. So for the last 6 months, I have been working to revamp my website so that I am uploading, and I have uploaded literally hundreds of photos of hundreds of species, so that you guys are going to be able to go to that website, search, look at the pictures, look at the descriptions I'm giving you of the species I'm taking. It's going to link you to videos with the footage of that species as well. So I just want to say, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, because that is coming up really soon. And you'll know it happened because I'm going to be doing like a launch video and kind of explaining to you a bit of the background behind the website and how you can best utilise it. So keep it a secret for now, subscribe and stay up to date, because this is something I am super excited about, and I'm really hoping it's going to bring your guys' rock pooling up to the next level as you begin to learn in a very fun way more about the species. Okay, back on with that. There are some great websites online that have uploaded photos similarly and are a resource to work out what things are, and that's some ones I want to point out is places like A Photo Marine, that has absolutely tons of great pictures of great species, and Algae Base is great for the algae, so for your seaweeds. So those two combined really do cover a lot of the information or pictures you need on some of the more specific species, if those books aren't giving you enough photos for you to look at, because that's the other thing, is those books are limited to the 3 or 4 photos they have on each page. Online will give you a lot more photos, so that if your specimen of that species looks a bit weird, then maybe you can cross compare with other things. Moving on to what I'm talking about, that sometimes pictures and descriptions are not enough. So we move on to this book. Amazing! This book is the Handbook of Marine Fauna of Northwest Europe. Again, there will be versions of this book, maybe not by the same people, but in your areas, done by Hayward and Ryland, who were actually teachers and lecturers at, and researchers at Swansea University, which I went to, but just before I was there. And they wrote and identified and described all of the species, okay, not all of the species, but the vast majority of species into this book. And you really do only need one book. It covers basically, I mean, there's shells and shells, like bivalves, the things in the shells, crabs, isopods, amphipods, worms, bryozoans, hydroids, everything. Everything is in this book. And when you start your undergrad and you're doing rock pooling work, really, I think almost every undergrad in the entire UK must have used this book at some point. This is kind of getting to university level. And it doesn't mean that other people can't use it as well. everyone can buy it and everyone can use it. But at this point we're getting to use microscopes, dissection microscopes, so you can actually get dissection microscopes, maybe not great quality, but you can get them online, like digital ones as well. So if you are a rock pooler that wants to do this as a hobby, it is a economically viable option to be able to identify down to this level. It's not reserved specifically for, you know, university research, but that's the kind of level that we're now at. And instead of IDing things by pictures, there are a lot of scientific drawings, because there will be scientific drawings of the specific points, specific anatomy of that animal that you need. So we were talking about doing bryozoans, there will be a drawing of the colony, there will be a drawing of a little zooid, and then there'll be a drawing of the features of that zooid, the specific ones you need to pay attention to. And like the other books, we're now getting a lot more information on the life cycle, the history of the animal. So we're talking about bryozoans. I mean, we've got a full page of text here before, a couple full pages of text here, and these pages are particularly useful because it has all of the anatomy of a bryozoan labelled with their exact terminology, and you're going to need that because when you start to read it, it pretty much sounds like a different language, because now we're talking so specific that you need to know exactly what each bit of that bryozoan's anatomy. And we're not talking about descriptions anymore, we are now using something called keys, which do take some getting used to, and a lot of training is done at undergrad to try and work out like how to use these properly. But basically it works a bit like a flow diagram but written in paper. So it will start off really broad with two statements, and whichever one you think is most true to the species that you're looking at, you go to the end, it will give you a number, and you'll jump to that next number. It will then give you a series of more of statements, and you pick the ones that you think are true. Then it will give you basically a family. When you get to that family, you then scroll to that family's section, it will give you a description, and then it will give you more statements that you think are true, and that will then give you eventually the species, which you then find the little picture of and a description and make sure it all lines up. It's now getting a lot more complicated, and I'm not going to work my way through to electroplosa because without having the sample in front of me, I'm not sure I could even do it from the keys. I suppose I could work backwards, but let me give you some examples. It starts off with something rather, not vague, but as broad as it can be. Zooids variously shaped, but not rising upwards from long stolons, or zooids cylindrical or elongated, arising singly in clusters or in fused groups from long, creeping or free stolons. See what I mean about the fact that this is not, you know, this is not a user-friendly manual. There are many words in here that you have to clarify and make sure you know what they are before moving on. Again, you would look back at here, work out what stolons are, work out what you think the descriptions of long, creeping and free are before moving on. So from going into the 9 species in the Collins Guide, this book covers 79 species of bryozoans. So really you're starting to see what is being missed out by just using picture ID guides versus being able to key them and look at it. But this book, although it has over 1,500 species in it, doesn't really cover all of it, and we haven't really, you know, covered it all. I found that this is great for undergrad level, but moving past, when you get to a point where you're really needing to know exactly what the species are and you're encountering a lot of species, then there is a next level. Done still by Hayward and Ryland. We now move on to these white books, and they're done by the Linnean Society of London, the Estuarine and Coastal Sciences Association, and by the Field Studies Council. But I just always know them as white books because when you go I used to go to my library. Imagine an entire bookshelf the size of a wall filled with white books of these, covering anemones, hydroids, fish, all of them. These 4 here just cover bryozoans. I think that there is, I'm not going to count them all, but there is definitely more than 79 species covered in these books. And you have to start to branch them into different types of bryozoans. So this one is called Chelostomatus bryozoa. This is Ascophora bryozoans. This one is also Chelostomatus bryozoans, but part 1 and part 2. And Cyclostome bryozoans. It is a tedious world working out exactly what species are. You use keys and there are illustration descriptions and descriptions of the thing. It is pretty much the same level, except now we're getting a lot more tedious and a lot more technical when it comes to picking between species, because there are so many more species you have to make sure you're getting exactly right. So now our description of Electropolosa is a lot different. Autozooids, which are, so now we're distinguishing that there are sometimes different types of zooids or different parts of zooids. Autozooids are typically elongated, subrectangular or oval, narrow proximally, commonly 0.5 to 0.6 times 0.2 to 0.35 millimeters. Gymnocyst occupying about 1/2 of the frontal surface of the autozooid, closely perforated by large round pores, calcification thin and translucent, OPSR oval with distinct rim, thickened in the proximal half by a narrow, downward deflected cryptocyst. Distally, the rim extends a shallow arch onto the proximal ends of the succeeding autozooids. Do you see what I mean? So now we're getting very fussy. We're getting not just the description of the zooid, not just the description of the spines, we are talking texture, type, size, whether the spines go up, down, what direction they are, about each and every species that you find. And it's only from the ridiculously hard work of marine biologists and taxonomists, I can't say it, taxonomists out there that have painstakingly described each of these species, that we can begin to tell the differences between them. I do want to end on why is it important to know all of them. Well, for general enjoyment and rock pooling, it probably isn't. You probably don't need to know exactly down to each individual species what is there. But you should know that there are literally hundreds and thousands of species on the rocky shore that you might not notice. And from a marine biology point of view, from a conservation point of view, each of these species has evolved and adapted to live in different conditions. They play a role in the ecosystem, and only by knowing what that whole ecosystem is can we make sure that we aren't doing things to detrimentally affect maybe a rarer species or the entire ecosystem itself. If we don't understand each part of that ecosystem, then how can we understand that as it changes, as it maybe gets threatened, exactly what is being threatened? And you don't want to overlook something. You don't want to not realise what a species is, how it feeds, what is important to that particular species, because we might lose it. And in itself, it's a great shame to lose a species, and it's also a shame because they provide so much life, they provide a great ecosystem, and they provide a service back to us. Bryozoans are probably not the best example to tell you, what do bryozoans do for us, but things like seaweeds and fish are really obvious ways to kind of share that message of what do they do for us. Seaweeds take in an unbelievable amount of carbon dioxide. and store that into the sea and into the nutrients. Fish provide nurseries, they provide food, they provide nutrients, and each individual, even if it's not flashy like a bryozoan, plays its role in that ecosystem and keeping that turning over. So it is important for us to know it, and as marine biologists it's important that we know how to ID them. It's important to have those fancy books, but as a rock pooler you can stick to the Collins Guide, the Sea Search and websites. I really recommend getting your hands on all three and checking out my website when it comes up and subscribing to make sure that you stay in tuned and know when it comes up. Thanks. But honestly, it really does help. I'm a small YouTuber. Subscribing is the best way for you to help support me and this channel and keep it growing, so that all the people know about how amazing rock pooling is and how tedious marine biologists have to sit at a desk all day and look down a microscope to try and work out how many spines a bryozoan has. So, but yeah, and if you're a marine biologist, I would say that if you're looking at your marine biology student and you're looking to buy stuff, if you're undergrad, your university should be providing copies of these in their library and in their labs, so don't go out and buy them. But I brought mine and have borrowed these, so I mean, I always just love to have a copy of books because they're so pretty and I can stare at them and I love them. So yeah, so that's been today's video. If you've ever wondered what it is, let me know if you want to learn how to ID things via a key, if that's something you're interested in, and I can make a video on kind of a quick guide to learning how to do it. If that's something that you're interested in, but that is a very specific skill, so I won't make it unless I get comments below telling me to make it. So if that's something you're particularly interested in, please shout very loudly in the comments, caps locks and everything, something about keys. I will be back sooner than next Wednesday, but I will definitely be back next Wednesday with a video. But I've also got a very special video coming up on Friday, so make sure to subscribe to not miss that too. So I will see you all Friday, but next Wednesday, because I post every single Wednesday marine and rock pooling content. Thanks for watching everyone, see you next week, bye!